Welcome. My name is Terry Ladd, and in this short presentation, I'm going to show you how you can improve your painter safety while protecting your company from OSHA, and do it in only minutes per week without having to become a safety guru. But before I get started, let me share a running joke I had with my painters for years. Every Monday morning after our weekly foreman's meeting, as the guys were headed out of the shop and onto their jobs, I'd yell after them, "Just remember, if you fall off that ladder, you're fired before you hit the ground." It was a little bit of gallows humor, a not so subtle way to remind the guys to be safe out there. And if you're like I was, the worry about someone actually falling is an occasional nagging thought in the back of your mind. Am I right? So let me give you two quick case studies about how well the OSHA Neutralizer program is working for painters just like you. First, let me tell you about Patrick out of St. Louis, Missouri. Patrick runs a medium-sized shop, 10 guys, 1 estimator, and 1 field supervisor. Patrick came to me concerned about safety because a competitor had just had a painter die from a fall, and the word on the street was that OSHA was taking a look at all the painters in the St. Louis area. Specifically, they were trying to enforce the fall protection directives. He was worried that he hadn't been doing much on the safety front and didn't want to get caught flat-footed. So I explained how the OSHA Neutralizer program works, and Patrick bought in. And it's a good thing he did, because 3 weeks later he got a call from one of his foremen that an OSHA compliance officer was on his job site. Patrick told the foreman to ask the compliance officer to wait until he got there, something he learned from my program, and then he rushed over. Upon arrival, the compliance officer told Patrick he was looking into the fall protection measures local painters were taking and wanted Patrick to prove he was taking these seriously. And as proof, she wanted to see 3 things from Patrick. I'm going to explain those 3 things in more detail in a few minutes, but here's what happened that day. Patrick opened his laptop, logged into his account on the OSHA Neutralizer website, and was able to show the compliance officer everything she had requested in about 3 minutes. As he was telling me about his experience, Patrick said the compliance officer's jaw dropped. She told him to keep up the good work, and she turned around and left. Pretty amazing, right? Now let me tell you about Kevin from Thousand Oaks. His story's a little different, but very common. He came to me once he was already in a little hot water with OSHA. No one had been injured, but OSHA was doing what they call programmed inspections in his area, and Kevin, maybe just like you, wasn't prepared. He played it cool with me on the phone, but I could tell underneath that he was a little scared. As he began to open up about the situation, he told me that he was worried because he simply didn't know what the investigation process was going to be like, and he didn't have much of the documentation the compliance officer had asked for. His biggest fear was that he simply didn't know how exposed he was. Like most painting contractors I speak with, he wanted to do right by his painters, but he didn't know exactly what he was supposed to be doing. Every time he looked into it, he just got more confused, and on top of that, simply running his business didn't leave him a ton of time to figure it all out. Sound familiar? Anyway, I explained the OSHA Neutralizer program to him, and he got started. Within the first 10 minutes, Kevin felt much better. He learned what the investigation process was going to be like, and he had a step-by-step plan to minimize his exposure. Basically, he wasn't in the dark anymore, and he had concrete actions he could take to put a safety program in place. Moreover, he and I spoke about the specific tactics he could use to reduce the fines that were likely coming his way. By the time the informal hearing took place 6 weeks later, Kevin was able to show that he understood his safety responsibilities and was making a good faith effort to keep his painters safe. The fines Kevin faced were originally $21,825, but based on what he'd put in place over the previous 6 weeks, they were reduced to just $1,800. Pretty amazing, huh? I can tell you hundreds more stories just like these, but we don't have the time. Why don't we talk about who this program is for? This program's for you if you have painters working in the field. Doesn't matter if they're employees or subcrews, or if you work on residential or commercial projects. OSHA requires that you create a safe work environment regardless of the labor sources. It's also for you if you think about your painting company as an asset you don't want to lose. Not only can OSHA fine you and potentially bankrupt you, but it can shut you down with the stroke of a pen. This program protects you from these nightmare outcomes. And finally, this program is for you if you want to focus on growing your business rather than being distracted by safety issues. Safety shouldn't be a burden to put in place, but it certainly feels that way if you're trying to do it on your own. The OSHA Neutralizer was specifically designed to make putting a safety program in place as easy as possible so you can focus on landing jobs and making money. I know that putting a safety program in place seems hard. You've got record keeping and safety briefings and field inspections and reporting requirements, just to name a few. There's so many moving pieces, and it's also confusing where you even start. But it doesn't have to be that way if you know what you're supposed to do and how and when to do it. When the mystery is removed and you have the tools designed to make it simple, along with step-by-step instructions, you're golden. Now, you need to understand something. The only way for you to protect your painters and your company from OSHA investigations is with a bulletproof safety program. And the only way to quickly and easily put a bulletproof safety program in place is using the OSHA Neutralizer for painters. Before I tell you about it, though, you're probably wondering, why should I listen to you? Fair question. Let me tell you a little about my story. First, I ran the largest painting shop in San Francisco for 14 years. At our peak, I was running 65 painters and a staff of 8. I hold contractor state license board licenses for both painting and general contracting. Next, I'm also a veteran, and while that may not mean much to you, it does to me. The Army taught me how to improvise, adapt, and overcome, skills I needed to get out of my own safety nightmare. I also earned an MBA from the University of Rochester, concentrating in both marketing and operations. That education helped me design this program to meet your needs and OSHA's requirements at the same time. Along the way, I also became an EPA certified lead inspector. My safety nightmare didn't just involve OSHA, but also the EPA and the Department of Public Health. So when I resolved to clean up my mess, as I do with just about everything else, I geeked out on it and picked up a lead inspector certification along the way. And I've been consulting with painters just like you on OSHA issues for more than 8 years now. As a safety guy, I've created a number of programs, all specifically designed for painting contractors. And at this point, almost 1,000 painting contractors just like you are using my programs to protect their painters and avoid punitive OSHA fines. But I wasn't always a safety expert. In fact, I was just a normal guy running a modestly successful painting business in San Francisco. And I was like most painters. I knew the basics of safety, and so did my guys. But that didn't mean much to OSHA. They have extensive regulations and specific ways that things must be done. I didn't have the formal safety plan in place, and I wasn't doing much to proactively protect my guys. I just reminded the guys to be safe and hope no one got hurt. Maybe you can relate. Then one day, one of my painters fell off a ladder, and that's one of the worst calls you'll ever get. At first, I was only concerned about my painter, Daniel. How badly was he hurt? Was he going to be okay? In a cold sweat, I rushed to the hospital. When I got there, the doctors told me Daniel had 2 cracked ribs and that he would likely be released in the morning. Whoa, what a sigh of relief. It wasn't nearly as bad as it could have been. Then the doctor, incorrectly I might add, told me that I likely needed to report the accident to OSHA. I didn't know the first thing about how to report an accident, and I was kind of in a panic. Who did I need to report it to? What was I supposed to disclose? Was there a clock ticking on this? It took me a few hours to figure out who to call, but I finally got in touch with the right office. I made the report and was told I would need to meet with the compliance officer in 3 days. And it wasn't long before I found out OSHA would be referring the case to the EPA and the California Department of Public Health as well. I'm not sure I can explain the nightmare that was just getting started. I had no idea what to expect, and that fear of the unknown got my head running. How exposed was I? What was the role of each of these different organizations? What were my requirements for each? What were the possible penalties? Did I need a lawyer? The cold sweat turned to a paralysis. I wasn't sure where to turn to next, what to do, how to start figuring it out. I felt stuck and alone. The sense of impending doom was overwhelming. While I was still concerned about Daniel, he wasn't my main focus. He was going to be okay. But without any idea of what was about to go down with these various agencies and my mind racing, I had 2 crushing fears. First, what was my financial exposure? Would I lose the business? I was a corporation, but still wasn't sure that it would protect me personally. Could I also lose my house and everything else? But worse, could I possibly be sentenced to prison for this? It didn't seem likely over a couple of cracked ribs, but you never know once the government gets involved. I'd heard stories of negligent contractors getting sentenced to prison time. Without any documentation of a safety program, could this be considered negligence? To say I had trouble sleeping would be an understatement. My mind was like a dark alley late at night, not a place you want to go alone. And I didn't have anyone to talk to about it. It was the loneliest I've ever been in my life. Thankfully, the day of my meeting with the compliance officer finally arrived. I hoped that I'd at least get an idea of what was going to happen, how bad of a jam I was in, and be able to come up with a plan to get myself out. But it just got worse. The compliance officer asked me to provide all sorts of documentation, and each time he asked for something, I had to tell him I didn't have it. As the requests kept piling up, so did my shame and my fear, and at some point it turned into despair. I felt like an irresponsible little kid caught doing bad things, standing in front of the principal, my parents, or my pastor. That may sound a little dramatic, but I assure you my shame and embarrassment and fear were real, and I wouldn't wish that on anyone. But once I got as low as I could possibly get, I realized I needed to make a decision. What was I going to do about it? I really had two options. I could fumble my way through this, figure out how to do the minimum the compliance officers are requiring of me, write the check when the fines arrived, and go back to what I was doing, just like a lot of other unethical contractors. Or I could resolve myself to take massive action, to get it right, to put a great safety program in place, something I could be proud of, and hopefully find a little bit of redemption. Now, I may make mistakes, who doesn't? But I also know right from wrong, and I have a strong work ethic. You're probably like this too, or you wouldn't still be listening to me. So it wasn't a hard decision to do the right thing. It was time to protect my painters from accidents and injuries, my company from bankruptcy, and my family's financial future. I resolved right then that I would put a great safety program in place. But as I started looking for a program, that's when I found out that there simply were no turnkey safety programs. Nothing existed. Sure, there were lots of resources out there, but none of it was just in plain English. You needed a freaking lawyer to understand it all. And none of it told me exactly what I needed to do. It still required interpretation. And none of it was specific to my trade, painting. Everything out there was for general construction or had the painting topics buried within the requirements for all the other trades. And there certainly weren't any tools to make it fast and easy. I didn't understand why someone wasn't using technology to make safety easy. And no one I spoke with seemed to be able to answer my questions clearly. They all spoke the same bureaucratic language that the regulations are written in. And that's when it hit me. If I was going to build a bulletproof safety program for my company, I was pretty much on my own. At first I was a little discouraged, but then I recalled the shame and the fear which had driven me to resolve myself to solve this problem once and for all. And that resolve came back. I told myself, you can do this, you just need a plan. And the plan was pretty simple. Learn everything I could about safety, build the tools and processes to put it in place, test it in the field, and revise it as necessary. Rinse and repeat. Notice I said simple, not easy. There's certainly a difference. The learning portion is where I geeked out. I love learning, and this was like designing my own graduate course in safety. I read everything I could get my hands on. I took online safety classes and local university courses. I even traveled across the country a few times to take OSHA and EPA certified training. Then I went and hired a certified industrial hygienist, a CIH, to work in my company shoulder to shoulder with me. And during all this, I picked the brains of the compliance officers who were willing to share their experience. I ended up learning more about safety than most safety experts. Then it became about building systems and processes and tools. It started with a set of written plans specific to painters and the tasks they perform. And then I developed a ton of safety briefings and even had them translated into Spanish. Next, field enforcement required a streamlined process for doing periodic field inspections, so I built out that process and tools. And to make the briefings and inspections easier, as well as keep all the documentation organized, I decided to put them all into a mobile safety app. Luckily, my undergraduate degree was in computer science. And finally, I rewrote everything in plain English and put it on a website so it could be used as either a reference in the future or walkthrough as a course, or both for that matter. I knew everything wouldn't work perfectly the first time, so I made sure I tested all of this in the field with my painters. They told me what worked, what didn't, and gave me the key insights on how to make it better, faster, stronger. That, along with review and input from my certified industrial hygienist and the compliance officers, helped me get it all dialed in. With each iteration, each piece got easier and faster until it was humming like a well-oiled machine. But I gotta tell you, it was not an easy task. I spent hundreds of hours in the regs trying to decipher what they were really saying, really telling me what to do. And I'm not sure why I was surprised, but both the regs and the compliance officers contradicted each other. One section of the regs would say one thing, but another section of the regs would say something completely different. Same with the compliance officers. I guess that's just our government for you. And finally, this took a ton of my time and attention, which was being taken away from the normal day-to-day running of my business. Sales were sagging while I focused on safety, but I knew I had to keep at it, hoping it would be worth it in the long run. In the end, though, I created something of extreme value to my company, a bulletproof safety program. Written plans, safety briefings in 2 languages, field inspection and enforcement tools, a mobile app to make it fast and easy to keep it all organized, a reference website that I could use to brush up on specific subjects as needed, and a set of step-by-step instructions so that I could delegate safety activities to someone on my staff. And it had transformed my business. About this time, the investigations were wrapping up, in large part thanks to this singular focus I'd undertaken. And I even had a few of the compliance officers compliment me on the program. My painters were definitely safer. Even the normal small bumps and cuts and bruises were disappearing. I truly felt my company was now protected from future OSHA violations. Even better, the way the program was set up, it was basically now on autopilot. It was all happening now without somebody micromanaging it. That gave me a tremendous sense of pride in my team, and I was finally able to sleep well at night. From a sense of dread and shame and despair, I now had peace of mind that I was doing the right thing by my people and my family. Now, if safety has been a struggle in your painting business, there's probably a few reasons why. First, OSHA doesn't make it easy for you. The regs are almost impossible to read in that bureaucratic language that they're written in. And there is not one section for painters. It's all mixed together in the regs with safety info on cranes and backhoes and working below grade and all sorts of other stuff. But what I found the most frustrating was that the regs contradict themselves and the compliance officers interpret the regs differently from one compliance officer to the next. So it isn't your fault that it seems complex, confusing, and overwhelming. It is all of those things. Second, most of the online training is useless. For instance, OSHA 10 and OSHA 30 are for general construction. If you or your painters sit through those 10 or 30-hour courses, for the most part, they're not learning safety skills appropriate for your trade. Some of it's applicable, but most of it is not. And all of the certified or approved courses are certified or approved only if they teach to the regs. That means the language is twisted and it isn't organized in a meaningful way. It simply doesn't tell you in plain English what you're supposed to be doing. You aren't crazy for wanting something specific to the painting trade and easy to understand, but all those online training courses are not it. And finally, no one will tell you exactly what OSHA is looking for. The compliance officers won't tell you because it isn't their job. Their job's enforcement, not training. The approved training companies won't tell you because they have to teach to the regs, not interpret it for you. Even most certified industrial hygienists won't tell you. They often use the same twisted language as the regs, and their services are geared more towards very large contractors, not tradesmen and small businesses. No wonder it seems like we're all wandering around in the dark. But that was the world I entered when I created my program, and it wasn't cheap. I spent more than $27,000 on courses and training. The mobile app cost me another $31,000. The certified industrial hygienist I hired wasn't cheap, another $23,000. And the professional fees for a lawyer to review it all, as well as translation services, were almost another $6,000. It cost me more than $87,000 to build what I did, and you'd probably spend $100,000 if you tried to build it today. Well, those were my out-of-pocket development costs. I thought I'd share with you the other costs the investigation saddled me with. First, even though I beat almost every one of the violations against my company, I still paid out $72,000 in fines for 2 cracked ribs. And second, I conservatively estimate that my company missed out on $500,000 in sales that year because I was distracted from my normal day-to-day operations. That $500,000 would have netted me roughly $100,000. Adding all these up and the experience and development costs, I spent over $260,000. That's an expensive education, and I really don't want you to have to pay anything near that to put safety in place in your business. So, I want to share with you 3 secrets of OSHA compliance. Secret number 1, remove as much complexity and confusion from the process as possible. Secret number 2, make the execution of safety tasks as quick and easy as possible. Secret number 3, OSHA will come calling at some point, so you better be prepared. Let me explain each of these in a little more detail. So the first secret is to remove complexity and confusion so that safety becomes simple and you know what to do and when. Safety is so confusing, it's hard to know where to start. Am I supposed to be doing inspections? What should I be inspecting for? How often? Am I supposed to be doing safety training or briefings? What am I supposed to train or brief them on? Or am I supposed to hire somebody else to do that? Or should I send them to a course? Do I need to be certified somehow to do inspections and training? What reports, records, or other documentation am I responsible for? And how do I complete all of those? I'm sure you've asked yourself some of these or other similar questions, right? Well, let me share with you what I've learned OSHA wants to see. The compliance officers will tell you that they're looking for you to show what they say is a good faith effort to create a safe work environment. And that seems pretty straightforward, but what's that really look like? After all my learning, I've determined it boils down to three things. First, have a written safety program that everyone knows about and agrees to follow. Second, perform ongoing safety briefings so your painters know what types of hazards they're likely to run into and how to avoid or handle those hazards. And third, enforce safe work practices in the field to ensure compliance. So I set about doing exactly what they told me they wanted. I built a set of compliant written safety plans, developed 50 plus safety briefings in both English and Spanish, and created a streamlined field inspection process. Basically, I boiled down everything OSHA said they looked for as proof of that good faith effort to create a safe work environment into 3 buckets. And then for each bucket, I built the nuts and bolts tools. Finally, after passing these pieces of the puzzle by the compliance officers and my CIH, I assembled the pieces into logical sets and made it all step by step. Pretty cool, huh? Well, let me show you. Here are all the plans that make up the written portion of the program. They cover off the safety topics painters are most likely to come across in the normal process of their jobs. They need to be tailored for your company, having your company name, address, etc. placed into specific locations. And some states require a couple of specific extra plans. Collectively, there are over 600 pages. And they're in the same bureaucratic language the regs are written in because they have to comply with those regs. You're never going to read them, your painters are never going to read them, and that's the bad news. But they are required, and they're something that OSHA regularly asks for. The good news is that I rewrote everything in plain English, boiled it all down into just what you need to know, and organized it all on an explainer website. For each of the written plans, there's a one-pager with 3 sections. What the painters are supposed to be doing in the field so you know what to inspect for, anything I think you need to know about so you can speak intelligently about the topic, and what you're required to do as the business owner, general manager, or safety officer. Easy peasy. The explainer website also has a ton of other useful information, again, all in plain English. For instance, we have a section on what your record-keeping requirements are with examples of the various forms, a section explaining the various types of OSHA investigations as well as how to handle them, what to say or do or not say or do during an investigation or an interview, a section on OSHA's lead requirements, even a section on how to handle safety issues if you're using subs instead of employees. The site is set up so that you can use it as a reference, getting whatever info you need whenever you need it. But I've also set it up as a course. As you go through each section, at the bottom are a few true-false questions. Finish all of these, and I'll provide you with a certificate of completion. The idea here was to gather all the relevant info, organize it, and make it accessible to you whenever, however you want it. Make sense? The next piece is the mobile app, which I'm really excited to show you. Remember I talked about testing and revising the tools I was building? Well, for safety briefings and field inspections, we started by creating paper versions of the content. Everyone loved the content and the ease with which these tasks could now be done. But the downside of using paper was that it was hard to get it into the right hands in the right place at the right time, as well as it was a pain to collect it, store it, and access it whenever we needed it. And that's why I built the mobile app. It contains the field inspection checklist, 54 safety briefings in both English and Spanish, all the forms you would need if there's ever an accident, and as a bonus, all the forms you need if you do lead work and are trying to be EPA RRP compliant. The result is that all the content you need, all the briefings, all the field inspection checklists, even the EPA forms you need to do lead work, all of them are complete, organized, and accessible at the touch of a button. Pretty slick, right? Do you see how these tools cover the three things OSHA told us they were looking for? Written plans, safety briefings, and field inspections. Now we know what to do and we have the content in place. But wouldn't you love to offload responsibilities for these tasks to your team instead of you having to be in multiple places at once? And that brings us to secret number 2. How to put safety on autopilot in only minutes per week. Even knowing exactly what to do and having all the necessary content didn't solve the problem for me though. I still didn't want to be driving all over the place, trying to be in multiple places at once just to get the briefings and inspections done. If you're like I was, you're already short on time. Piling on more safety activities, ain't nobody got time for that. And that's when it hit me. I needed to make the mobile app multi-user so I could give it to my staff and crews to run. And I needed a dashboard where I could monitor if they were doing it all. And then I thought, if I create it correctly, I'll be able to manage the whole thing remotely, basically putting my safety program on autopilot. And that's when I got busy building the desktop dashboard. Here, let me show you. Here's what we call the desktop dashboard. It's the place where you manage users for your account and see all of the inspections, briefings, and other forms your team submitted. Adding new users is very simple, as is deactivating them. And it's just as simple to manage the submitted briefings and inspection forms. From the form view, you get a chronological list of all the documents ever submitted by your team. At the top, there are numerous ways to filter and search for particular forms, by form type, by date, by user, etc. When I open one up, at the top you see the form contains all the who, what, why, where, when details. And the middle has the content of the briefing, and at the bottom are the signatures of those who received it. The forms are not editable once they're submitted. They're date stamped and cannot be tampered with. This gives OSHA confidence you aren't out there trying to recreate safety documentation and lends trust to the forms. Add and remove users, manage and monitor briefings and inspections, keep it all organized in one place, access it from anywhere, wherever you want. This is what brings the whole thing together, effectively putting safety on autopilot. Which leads me to the third secret, how to calculate your risk and be prepared. It isn't going to happen to me. We all think it, and at least in my situation, my decision not to deal with safety properly just reinforced this false belief that it wasn't going to happen to me. My whole strategy to that point had just been hoping it wasn't going to happen to me. This reinforced those thoughts. Occasionally I'd hear about a competitor who had someone get hurt, but it never seemed like much of a big deal. The reason for that, though, is simply that I wasn't on the inside. I didn't see the investigation and the fines and the nightmare it was for them. I only heard about the accident, not the aftermath. And then I'd think, I've been in business for a number of years without any issues. Why is it going to be any different in the future? Of course, I didn't know about all the close calls the guys were hiding from me. To me, it was out of sight, out of mind. It just seemed very remote and unlikely. So here I was, hoping it wasn't going to happen, blind to my peers it was happening to, and convinced the odds were much shorter than they really were. I didn't realize an OSHA investigation would likely come right out of the blue, and it could happen at any time. But let me tell you about the odds, because I think you'll be surprised. It turns out that roughly 17% of all painting contractors have a run-in with OSHA each year. And often those run-ins have nothing to do with an accident or an injury. OSHA does what are called program inspections, where they target an industry or a geographic location or a particular type of accident that's been happening that they'd like to see stop. And they proactively visit companies in the industry or location or perform that type of work. Their goal is to find companies who are in violation and make an example out of them so that all contractors in the area take notice and change their behavior. Another thing I know is that OSHA fines are averaging $24,000 right now. That's an average. If you're like I was, basically completely exposed, or you become the company that they want to make an example of, you can expect significantly higher fines. I'm telling you the truth, I see and hear about it every day all across the country. So that means every year you're basically rolling the dice on a 1 in 6 chance of incurring a $24,000 fine or worse. It really is just a matter of time, so it absolutely pays to be prepared. What does being prepared look like? Well, first of all, if it isn't documented, it never happened. You can do all the safety training and briefings and inspections you want, but if you do not have a description of it, dated and signed, OSHA is not going to take your word for it. And second, all that documentation needs to be organized and accessible. That is the key to stopping an initial inquiry in its tracks before it turns into an invasive investigation. Remember I told you about my client Patrick from St. Louis? During his initial talk with the compliance officer, he was able to pull up his desktop dashboard right in front of her. She was astounded and ended up killing the inquiry right there. If Patrick had needed a day or two to get all the paperwork together, instead of having it at his fingertips, he would have had to schedule a second meeting. And even if he had been able to pull all the paperwork together, simply by scheduling that second meeting, the nature of the inquiry would have already changed into a deeper investigation. She would have come to that meeting looking to dig a little deeper. Now, I know that you're not fully satisfied with your current safety program, or you wouldn't still be with me. And the reasons probably run the gamut from you don't know what to do or when to do it, you don't have the time to figure it all out by yourself, and even if you did, you don't have time to manage an ongoing safety program. That and the old ways of implementing and managing painter safety sucked. You either had to buy a patchwork of online programs and local training, which only kind of applied to your industry, or you had to spend a ton of time and resources figuring it all out for yourself, like I did. Or you just stuck your head in the sand and just hope that no one gets hurt. And none of these are good solutions. But you don't have to do it that way any longer. You now know there's a better, new way. And it's called the OSHA Neutralizer for painters. Andrew in Minneapolis saw the value from day one. Quote, as an investment in my company, the OSHA Neutralizer for painters has been great. Most painters don't have a formal safety program, but those of us who do know the value it creates, and it couldn't have been easier to put in place. And Nicholas from Worcester loves the money he saves in his insurance premiums. I paid thousands for safety courses online that didn't improve safety at all. The OSHA Neutralizer is the exact opposite. Value from the minute I signed up. My crew is safer and my insurance premiums have dropped. Bravo! And Ruben from down in Florida loves its simplicity. Saying it's simple doesn't do it justice. It is brain dead easy. The written plans, the explainer website, the mobile app, someone's finally figured it all out and made it step by step. So let's go over what you get. First, you get more than 20 written plans tailored for your business. Depending on which state you live in, we'll include all the specific written plans OSHA requires you to have. Next, you get lifetime access to the explainer website. Remember, this is where I break everything down for you in plain English, boiled down to just the info you need, and all of it specific to the painting trade. The site is evergreen, meaning that we regularly maintain and update the content so you always have access to the latest info you need to stay compliant. Then you get access to the mobile safety app with all the safety briefings in both English and Spanish, the field inspection checklists, and as a bonus, we even include all the EPA or RP forms you must have if you do any sort of lead work. Once the initial 4-month period is over, as a member of the OSHA Neutralizer for Painters program, you get the preferred member pricing of $20 a month going forward. Along with the mobile safety app, you get access to the desktop dashboard, so you can manage your safety plan all in one place, keep everything organized, have everything at your fingertips, and basically put your safety program on autopilot. And when you continue on with the mobile safety app, you get access to the desktop dashboard for free. Then, to ensure you don't get lost or waste time doing things in the wrong order, you get my step-by-step instructions. They also make it really easy to assign managing safety to someone on your team, rather than having to do it all yourself. And finally, you get lifetime email support. Over the years, we've incorporated answers to the questions we've received into the content of the program. But maybe your situation's unique, or you have an investigation you need some guidance with, or whatever. We're here to walk you through it, whatever you're facing. You're not alone anymore. And when you add up the market value for all of these things, the total's over $4,400. I firmly believe that if you follow the OSHA Neutralizer for Painters program, you'll quickly and easily create a bulletproof safety program that protects your painters and your business. Now let's review everything you get when you buy the OSHA Neutralizer for Painters. The written plans, the plain English explainer website, 4 months of the mobile app and the desktop dashboard, step-by-step instructions, a lifetime of email support. And if you were to try to find these things separately out on the market, you'd pay well over $4,000 for them, if you could find them at all. So let me ask you, if all my program did was give you the clarity about what you need to do and when to do it, would it be worth it? And if all my program did was quickly and easily put a bulletproof safety program in place, would it be worth it? And finally, if all my program did was give you peace of mind that your painters and your business are protected, wouldn't that be worth it? Asked another way, what is one averted OSHA investigation worth to you? And what is the protection of your painters worth to you? And what's the protection of your business and your future worth to you? I'm sure you can see why it's a good deal at $44.40, right? But you know you're not going to pay $44.40 for it. We want to get it into the hands of as many painting contractors as possible. So we cut the price by 2/3, by 66%, and offer it now on our website for just $14.97. But because you stuck around and listened to my story, I want to drop the price even more. I'm trying to hit my goal in the next few days of reaching the 1,000th painter using my program. So until I reach that goal, I'm knocking another $500 off the price. This is absolutely the lowest price I've ever offered this program at, and you're not going to see a lower price. In fact, as soon as I sign up my 1,000th customer, the price is going back up. So get started now for only $9.97. I've been in business a long time, and I've found that there's really only two kinds of people. Those who are good at making the meaningful changes required to build a solid business, and those who are good at making excuses. You can't be both. If you're making excuses, I hate to say it, but I think you're going to have a really hard time trying to solve your safety problem. The good news is that you get to choose. In this moment, you can choose which type of person you're going to be. Don't be somebody who makes excuses. Be someone who takes action and protects both their painters and their business. One last time, let's review what you get with the OSHA Neutralizer for painters. You get the written plans. You get the Plain English Explainer website. You get 4 months of the mobile app and the desktop dashboard. And you get step-by-step instructions. You even get lifetime email support. And if you act today, you're going to get all of this, more than $4,400 of value, for only $997. Simply put, if you want to quickly and easily put a bulletproof safety program in place without having to become a safety guru, you don't have many options. My proven program was built by a painting contractor for painting contractors, with the sole goal of taking all the mystery and confusion out of painter safety. But you must make a decision to act, or you will just keep running the same risks you always have, and it's just a matter of time before you end up in a nightmare like I did. So click on the link or the button below and get the best pricing we'll ever offer for the OSHA Neutralizer for painters. As the creator of the OSHA Neutralizer for painters, I want to thank you for your time today, and please feel free to reach out to me with any questions you may have.